Barbers of Reddit, what was your oh crap moment? Barber here. I'm pretty experienced and a successful barber with my own place, but I definitely made some mistakes along the way. This story still makes me die inside a little. When I was training, maybe a few months in, so I had a bit of confidence, enough for me to not realize I still didn't know what I was doing. I was cutting this guy's hair and I got to his fringe. He wanted it really short and I was standing in front of him cutting along his forehead whilst chatting away. I took my scissors away to comb his hair, but flicked them around my fingers and they swung round and hit the guy right in the fricking iris. I froze. He froze. Eventually I asked, did I just hit you in the eye? By the way, he said I think so, trying to act like it wasn't sore for some reason. It eventually blew up in the shop once his shock wore off and someone else got him out the door. Found out a month later his wife was a nurse and she used some kind of eye drop and his eye was only scratched. Thank God, because I thought I blinded him. I gave him a free haircut next time. Just the one though. Just the one though, mayo. While I was training at a pretty chic salon in London, there was a kid who came in for a cut with his mum. She was a regular, the typical bi-weekly blow-dry client that was always dressed in the finest fineries and sent her kid to private school. He sat down in my colleague's chair and the mum gave a fairly detailed and particular instruction of a short back and sides, as if my colleague had never heard of a haircut before. She then sat down in the waiting area and picked up a magazine and began reading. This kid was a little crap. He squirmed and complained the entire time. My colleague, bless her, was very diplomatic and tried to be firm but fair to this kid. She was very experienced at this point and dealt with a fair share of spoilt kids. Towards the end of the cut, she very clearly told the boy to stay still as she was cutting the stray hairs around his ears. She told him that her scissors had just been sharpened and would hurt a lot if she cut him. He agreed to keep his head still. However, as previously stated, this boy was a little crap. He suddenly turned his head to something and she caught the top of his ear. Now, she wasn't lying about getting her scissors sharpened, and those things are hella sharp when they are. I will never forget the top bit of his ear just resting on the blades of her scissors and her wide-eyed pale expression of realization of what had happened. I don't know if you've ever cut an ear, but those things bleed. At this point, the mother put down her magazine, put her thunder face on, and stormed over to my colleague's section with the screaming and bleeding child in it. Wordless, she raised her arm with an open hand and slapped the kid straight in the face. That'll teach you for not listening. The whole salon was in complete shock. She pulled him up by the arm and dragged him out of the salon without a word to anyone else. We never saw them again. Absolutely, the most mental experience of working in a salon. That, and the crazy color change I had to do. But that is a story for another time. I've got a few stories. Started combing a guy's hair to get ready to cut it. Shifted the comb over the left side of his head and the hair did not move the way it was supposed to. I pulled the comb down again and realized the dude did not have a left ear. Didn't say anything about it. Gave him a cut that still worked with it and he left happy. Had a blind man come in once who said that this haircut was his first stop after getting out of a 25-year prison sentence for murdering his wife. Gave his name and everything. We looked him up and he did indeed murder his wife, who was also blind. During barber school I was the most eager to learn to straight razor shave of all the customers, so the instructor gave me all the hardest shaves, including an 80-year-old dude whose skin was so loose and unhealthy that each time I pulled the blade over his flesh, it brought up just as much dead skin as it did hair. I wasn't cutting him or anything, he just had that much dead skin just chilling on his face every other week. Had a mom bring in her son, about 8 years old, with beautiful long hair. Told me to shave it all off as short as we could go, which is a big red flag. Being still in school, I missed the warning signs and buzzed up the back of his head in time to see a bug as long as my thumbnail scurry back into where the hair was long. I inspected more closely and found several bugs of similar size. My instructor chewed out the mother very harshly. I suppose these aren't really oh crap moments in the way that you might have meant it, but I've got a lot of stories. I was in school still at the time and was cutting this guy's hair. He brought his girlfriend along and she was watching like a hawk over me. I'm halfway through the cut and almost done with the fade when the person next to me has their trolley too close to me, so I go to move it, but I didn't pay attention that my other hand had the clipper still running with no guard on. I made a nasty line through the fade that didn't look intentional at all and was sweating my butt off on how I was gonna fix this. The girlfriend of course points it out and the client is actually super chill about it and has me basically just run a super high 0.5 on the sides and back. 3 years later and to this day I haven't had an incident that bad. Could have been worse. He could have had maggots inside his scalp. Not me, but my mom who is a hairdresser. Did you know that some hair dye chemicals don't play well together? Turns out the lady had used some sort of home hair dye chemical that basically has tiny bits of metal in it. She didn't mention. My mom goes to dye her hair and puts the professional dye on it, and the hair more or less starts melting as the dye reacts. Her hair was totally ruined. There was no saving it. Only thing to do was to just get the new dye off as fast as possible. She was pretty understanding about the whole situation though. My co-worker at a salon was cutting a girl's hair and found lice. The girl's mom had left her for the trim and she had to wait for her mom in the lobby. We spent the next hour or so frantically cleaning around all of the other clients and stylists to sanitize the whole place top to bottom. When the mom came back and asked her why she didn't have her hair cut, she replied they found out. WHO brings their lice-ridden child to the salon. When my mom worked at Perfect Look, she says the lice was pretty much constant. So many lice kids. But she was told she wasn't legally allowed to say your kid has lice since that's technically a diagnosis. She was supposed to say something like we've found something that appears like it may be lice or something like that. Lots of the parents super did not care. The barber my dad took us kids to growing up kept a plastic ear in a big glass jar of water. Told all the little kids, jokingly, that it was the ear of a little boy who wouldn't be still when getting a haircut and he accidentally cut this kid's ear off. Said he was keeping it in formaldehyde to remind us all to be very still. It largely had the desired effect on the younger kids. Some kids just won't listen to hold still, or I'll cut off your ear. Might as well show 'em. Oh geez. I've been barbering for 7 years and I've got a couple stories. Mostly communication errors. I had a client come in with a super tight haircut, looked like it had just been cut, and asked for a 0 on the sides. I'm not sure what this guy was on, but a 0 was bald to me. So I start my bald line for my fade and he freaks out that it's way too short and I ruined his haircut. Since this never happens to me I got super upset and felt absolutely terrible. I've had clients who text me and ask for an appointment and then I forget to book it, then they show up and I'm busy and they don't have an appointment. I always comp them because I feel terrible. I used to work in a low-income neighborhood and worked at a black barbershop. I was cutting a kid's hair and since it was so curly you couldn't see his scalp or anything. Started cutting into it and sure enough, he had ringworm. I have hella stories but those are just the ones that come to mind. Brother of a barber who used to be a hair model back when I used to have a good head of hair. His instructor told a story during one of the shows about a mobster falling asleep during a shave. While shaving him, he accidentally cut off a mole. He said he kept on putting towels on him and then snuck across the street and hid in a bar watching through the window until the mobster left. Since he was only renting the chair in the shop he grabbed all his stuff and found another place to work after he was sure the mobster was gone. As far as I know gangs don't like moles at all so he might just have thanked him for taking care of it. Not a barber but my cousin worked in a salon when I was a kid and I would hang out there a lot after school. One day she cut a guy's head pretty bad with the clippers. Lots of blood but it wasn't too serious. This led to them dating and eventually getting married. So what you're saying is, she fricked up so bad she also fricked him. My dad let me line myself up once. Fricked up. Decided to cut the whole thing off and go bald. The plus side to being black is that 99% of the time being bald looks fine. I guess I was part of the 1% that looks like a freaking whopper malt ball. At least you don't have my dad's skull, or mine for that matter, because we have ridges and dents and bald is not an option. ETA, it lots of Star Trek fans. The typical not a barber here but I used to go to a local barber college to get my hair cut because it was cheap. One girl had never cut a white guy's hair and her teacher asked if I was okay with it. I said sure she has to learn somehow and it's just hair it can be shaved and should grow back. Told her how I wanted the hair cut. Pretty simple, a little short and off the ears. Jokingly said do not take my ears off. Long story short, I left with a bald head and a band-aid on the top of my left ear, after bleeding like a stuck pig due to blood thinners where she nicked me with the scissors. Even her teacher couldn't save the haircut. I did my best to try and help the girl calm down as she was ugly crying. Went back a month later and asked if the girl was there. Thankfully she was, and I simply smiled and said town too. She did it perfect second time around. Honestly, I think you going back and asking for her probably helped her a lot. I'm not a licensed barber or professional by any means, but I have been cutting my own hair for about 10 years. I'm really good at it, save a lot of time and money, know exactly how to do it, and never have to worry about getting something I don't like anymore. But it has taken a lot of trial and error over the years, especially when I was learning how to fade. This was 3 years ago. I start cutting like I normally do and start fading my sides. At the top on my head the guard pops off. Huge freaking chunk falls down my face. So me, still learning, not knowing how to fix it, decides it's best to just buzz it, which I've really only had to do 3 times in my career. I look dumb as crap with a buzzed head, so for some unknown reason, I also decide to shave my beard, thinking maybe it'll equal it all out. Nope. Apologies if this offends anyone, but I look like I'm receiving chemo at this point. Bro, I look like a thumb. Big toe looking butt. So I hated myself. My wife still makes fun of me to this day. I got endless crap from my family and was attached to a hat for like 2 months. This was the moment that made me never freak up again. Thumb from Spy Kids looking butt. Don't worry, a lot of us have gone too far and accidentally ended up looking like a potato. Not a barber, but when I was waiting for my turn to get cut, one of the barbers stopped cutting another guy and ran to the toilet. Guess it was literally an oh crap moment. I got seated with another barber thankfully. I think it was more of a oh crap. When I was a little kid and hid under the table with a pair of scissors to cut my own bangs, my mom screamed when she saw my work. I remember doing it by feel, didn't even have a mirror, but I don't remember how it looked. Ironically, a few years later my mom tried to trim my bangs and she did a horrible job. I had to wear a hat for a while. I remember in the 3rd grade I got a hold of a pair of scissors in class and gave myself the worst looking bowl cut the world has ever seen. I'm not a barber, but one time my mum cut my ear with the hair clippers and she freaked out whilst I was sat there wondering what the heck was going on until she shouted, "Get a tissue. We have blood loss XD." Dude, my mom did this to me with scissors. Been a professional barber for 2 years now. I like to tell my clients this story all the time, but it is the first time writing it, so bear with me. When I was in barber school I had a mother and her son come in to get a haircut for her son. They did not speak English very well, so there was a bit of a language barrier. She told me she wanted a 2 on top, which is very short, 1 stroke 4 inch left to be exact, and the little boy had close to 3 inches on top, so I figured they did not understand the lengths. I did try to explain to her that the 2 would be very short by showing her the guard, but she insisted he got a 2 on top. Being the dumbass I started my clipper down the middle of the kid's head. I remember hearing the clipper take off a bunch of hair and the child knew something was wrong and starting screaming. Oh crap. The mother came over and scolded me for taking it too short. She told me that she meant she wanted 2 inches left, not a number 2 guard. I apologized like 5 times and told them that I would at least make the buzz cut look good and get them a free haircut next time. As I was finishing up the kid's hair, literally on the last pass with my clippers, by an act of God or something, the guard I was using popped off and I went straight to skin down the middle of the top of this poor child's head. OSHITTT. I put my hand over the bald patch on this kid's head and just pretended that nothing had happened. Thankfully one of my instructors came by and I was able to flag him down for some assistance. I took my hand off the kid's head and my instructor started chucking and told me to go in the back and get some water while he sorts this out. He ended up getting in a big fight with the mother because she thought I did it on purpose for yelling at me earlier, but it wasn't accidentally, and she did come to her school and pay $5 for a student haircut. TLDR. Took a child's hair way too short. Tried to make it look good. Went even shorter than I already had on accident. Hide in back while instructor argues with mother about whether or not I did it on purpose. I went to a barbershop where the barbers spoke very little English and somehow there was some sort of communication error between us and he ended up shaving my sideburns up to the top of my ear. Ugh. I used to love my Kurdish barber for this reason. Any whiskers or hair on my cheeks or sides by the ear would get straight razored into oblivion as part of the service. This was a £5 plus tip, simple, short, back and sides. Those guys always went the extra mile though. Made me feel $1,000,000. My mother is a barber. She was tasked with cutting my husband's hair for our wedding. The guard comb thing that goes on electric razor popped off while she was enthusiastically talking to me. She accidentally buzzed a 0 on the back of his head. A 0 is the shortest you can cut the hair without it being bald, I believe. We never told him and no pictures were taken of the back of his head. If I can help it, I'll be taking this to my grave. If not, he'll forgive me but I'll feel bad still. Barber here. I had a client who came in that I hadn't seen in about 2 years. He was an older gentleman that used to come in once every couple months, but he just stopped after his wife passed away. Anyways, I guess his family put him in a home after she died and they did haircuts or something in there. I don't know. I didn't have enough time to figure it out. But his caretakers brought him in for some reason, dropped him off, and said they'd be back in a couple hours. Personally, I thought it was a dickish thing to do, but I always liked Gary, and it was cool to see him again. He smelled terrible, though, and all the color in his eyes was gone. His skin seemed really, God, I don't know, crispy. You could almost hear his skin crackle and pop when he moved his disgusting arms and legs. Gary wasn't even chatty like he used to be, but I figured he was depressed since his wife died. His kids abandoned him, and he smelled like bags of trash from a Chinese restaurant. Whatever. But the whole time he was waiting, he was wearing a baseball cap. Pirates or something. I dunno. I don't follow teams. Dude sits down and he mumbles some crap about his haircut. And I'm all like, Gary, it's going to be alright, no big deal. Let's get this hat off and I'll give you a trim on the house. Let's get you good. When I took Gary's cap off there was a lot of resistance. I guess the cap didn't come off easily is what I'm trying to say. I had to actually use both my hands to get that sucker off. So I'll lift the cap off with both my hands, and I'm gripping the bill so tightly I hear a small pop. Dude had the cap on tight, right? Even weirder, some bits of Gary's hair came up with the hat. It's starting to fall out now. Big guy, I asked. Gary mumbled a response. I put his hat down on the counter and went to work. Or would have, because that's when I noticed that Gary had a huge rash on his head where his hair should have been. And even worse, the rash was moving. It was freaking wiggling, even. I was scared as crap and leaned in. Oh no. I went back to his hat and saw that some of Gary's hair in the hat was moving as well. A little bit of vomit came up from my stomach and I told him we would have to do the haircut another day. The caretakers told me that they didn't know how long Gary had maggots in his head, but he only lived for a couple more months. My aunt was a barber in the 70s. One day during her shift a man came in and asked for a trim. During the cut he just offed himself. My aunt got a bit of brain in her mouth. One time I was doing clipper over comb to blend a client's haircut, and I sneezed unexpectedly. I made a hole on the side of his head. I turned him around and tried to blend it in the best I could, but the damage was done. Not the barber in this story. My younger sister was. This story happened about 38 years ago, so I'm recalling as best as I can remember. Among our friends group was a very sweet young man who we called Bubba. A little heavy and not the sharpest tool in the shed, but a sweet, good-hearted guy. Bubba's hair hung in his face, which drove Sissy nuts. We should note that he had a huge crush on Sissy. One evening we were sitting around my parents' dining room table playing spades. That's a card game. As always, Bubba's hair was hanging over his eyes. Sissy was practically twitching watching him brushing it away every 30 seconds. Finally, she spoke up and said, "Bubba, you need a haircut. Let me just trim your bangs." Of course he immediately agreed. Scissors and a towel were quickly tracked down and Sissy started clipping. It was uneven and kinda patchy. "This isn't going well." One of Genius' friends spoke up and said, "It ain't even. But I got an idea. Don't trim anymore for a minute." Dude pulls my mom's biscuit mixing bowl out of the cupboard and plonks it on poor Bubba's head. "There. Just cut straight across." And she did. Then cut straight across the back. The oh crap moment happened when Sissy took the bowl off Barber's head and we realized she had given poor Barber a literal bowl cut. He looked like the Dutch boy paint kid's pothead cousin. LOL. Our post reminded me of my youth. My mom gave me literal bowl cuts when I was a kid. I looked horrible. Dutch boy explains it perfectly. When I turned 14, she messed up my bangs. They were so short and a bit uneven. I told her that was the last time she was touching my hair. She never touched it again. When I was a kid, the hairdresser nicked my brother's ear and it bled a bit. I'm pretty sure that was an oh crap moment for her. My brother didn't even care. Those scissors are also extremely sharp. They cut through flesh easily and without much resistance. Not Barber was getting a haircut at a military barber. I wanted generic crew cut 1" top, 1/2" sides. Barber guy thought I liked my long butt quarantine hair and did 2 inches top, 1" side instead just in case I liked it better longer. I checked cause I trust barber man's opinion on hair a bit. Too long I look like Hitler. Asked for the original. Anyways, between the 2" to 1" conversion I heard him mutter Jesus Christ. I break out into a cold sweat but I can't find anything wrong with the cut after it ended. But seriously my guy, don't mutter the things. You can't find the mistake because part of your brain is now missing. He fricked up that bad. When I was like 5 I decided to steal the kitchen scissors, give myself a haircut, and then hide the hair in a toy purse. Once I realized what I looked like, I went up to my mom and told her I needed to go get another haircut. You can imagine her reaction. Kid, 17, with a bunch of acne, like total pizza face and neck, wanted a straight razor shave on the back of his neck and neck, sliced off a bunch of pimples that bleed for like 10 minutes, really gross. Not me, but my mom. She's been doing hair for 40+ years and last Friday she had a new customer who was so unhappy with how her hair turned out, she called out of work that day while still in the chair. My mom gave up her Saturday off to fix it, but the lady is coming back in 2 weeks, so we'll see if that happens again. In the meantime my mom's stressing that this lady truly hated her hair that much, and it's first time anything like this has ever happened to her. Not a barber, but within the first 2 weeks of COVID lockdowns, my boredom mixed with ADHD impulse brought me to think shaving my whole head was a good idea. I also convinced my brother to do it with me cause why not? For him, okay. For me, big mistake. Firstly, I do not have the best hairline, which I underestimated because once the top was gone that crap was pulling graph functions on my forehead. Frickin' y equals you fricked up headers. I should also mention I am very skinny, so mix the shaved head with that and I look like I was on chemo. In conclusion, good learning experience, but never again. Little late to the party, not a barber, but a submarine sailor. Inevitably someone on the boat has to take the role of barber. Very early on I figured out that if I cut hair I could gain favor with people around me. First few hundred cuts went surprisingly smooth and I gained a reputation for being good enough to get a cut for the wife. I had a waiting list, worked after hours, even spent money on some professional gear. It's a week before we get home from our long underway. Guys are lining up to get dolled up for their reunions. This older guy sits down, asks for a simple cut, buzz the top to a 5 and skin fade the sides. I start on my first pass on the top. Clippers cut through his greasy hair with easy boat rolls. I compensate. I'm almost done with the top and going for my final pass right down the middle. As I reach the front and shift to pull the clippers back, 2 things happen simultaneously. The man sneezes and the guard flies off. The microsecond between causes a perfect bald patch an inch behind his hairline. I handed him a 10 as an IOU for the fix up he'll have to get in a few weeks. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.